Welcome to the Dynasty Dummies podcast. I am Zach Reed. I am joined by JMic at JMic Check. It is the eve of week 3. There's a Thursday night game going. Brock Purdy is throwing for 400 yards on a 1.5 yard ADOT. So, all is right with the world. CMC and Debo are doing their thing. Ronnie Bell is the new hotness. You may be the next Puka, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We don't have a script tonight. We don't have a show sheet. We're still being affected by the writer's strike. So, JMic, take us in. How are you tonight? And what do you have on your mind?
Excited to be here with you, Zach. Week 3 of the NFL season is underway, and I'm currently out of town, so this is a road show for me to be able to record with you tonight. And here I am on the road, and finally having just a little bit of downtime to myself to be able to do some of the things that I really enjoy. I'm a big fan of Marvel and all things that they do. Big fan of that whole saga with the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And finally, I'm a little bit behind, but finally got some time to be able to watch Secret Invasion. This is highly anticipated adaptation from the comics. People were really excited for this. So finally, I got to power through it. First couple episodes were absolute home runs. And then we got toward the end of the actual story there, Zach, around episode 6. And listen, I thought I was missing something. I thought something was amiss. I was out, and it was strange. I didn't understand what happened or how it started so well and fell off so horribly. And I thought I might have been by myself. So I went to some of my trusted resources. They're not a sponsor of the show, but I really enjoy watching the good folks on the YouTube channel, New Rock Stars. So shout out to Eric Voss and all those folks over there. They put out quality content, and I thoroughly enjoy catching up and getting their perspectives on a lot of these things that us comic book nerds and folks who really enjoy the MCU get down on. Then I listened to Eric Voss talk about how they really missed Kevin Feige and company at Marvel really missed with how the show processed and a lot of the issues that were going on with it. And one of the things that Eric concluded is that obviously with the Screen Actors Guild, Writers Association strike that's happening right now, that could possibly be one of the issues as it pertains to how things are actually adapting when they get to the film and when they get to the cutting room floor per se to what was actually supposed to be the case when how it was written or things of that nature. And so I'm convinced at this point, Zach, that this NFL season is being affected by the writer's strike. That's the problem. The NFL script is absolutely broken. Tom Brady's gone, so there's no more protagonist, antagonist, then turn protagonist again for us to really center the story around. We've got problems. We've got issues here in week 3. The current script that we've got going on is written by some folks in a dark alley somewhere, probably Itchy and Scratchy from The Simpsons, put in on this. Like this is not good. This is big sadness. Nick Chubb out for the season. J.K. Dobbins. No, I'm not even going to gloss over that. Nick Chubb, who I watched his injury happen live in college when he slipped on the sidelines, messed up his knee in college. We see him get hurt in a primetime game. J.K. Dobbins is now out for the season. We've got Derrick Henry missing practice this week. Austin Eckler missing practice this week. We've got Saquon Barkley missing tonight's game in week 3. Zach, calamity, vanity. It's all vanity. What are we doing?
Oh man, this is ugly, and we're back to now. It's up to us. It's up to you as a dynasty manager, us as, I hate to use the term analysts because we're like whatever it is that we do,
whatever it is.
Yeah, talking about fantasy football, talking about Dynasty, trying to give you pivot points and places to jump off from and find edges. It's up to all of us to kind of figure out which direction we need the story for our individual teams to head and write that, because we are at pivot points now. I don't think there are very many people who have teams in Dynasty that have not been affected at some level with not just the injury to running backs, but we were talking tonight. I set lineups at 7:00 tonight. Went through. I have 6 teams. I have the Scott Fish Bowl and 5 other teams. Took players out, put players in. Derrick Henry, I'm sitting and I was like, I want to get the Giants and the 49ers where I'm square. Nothing had come down yet about Brandon Ayuk. So I left him in my lineup. I went upstairs, took a shower, came down. We're 2 minutes into the game. And Ronnie Bell should have an opportunity with Ayuk out tonight to make a name for himself. The rookie looking pretty good so far. The game time decision. What are we doing? And I got to be better. But we need to pivot. We need to figure out. We're back to the key to happiness is finding the lie to that fits you best. Like, we've got to figure out how to write this story to make our teams as good as they can be from where we are, and it is ugly.
In the immortal words of philosophers, I guess I should say, Panic at the Disco. Our right sins, not tragedies, right? Or however the song, right? So this process, Zach, and I love the way that you're phrasing this, or at least the way that I'm filtering this. If we're writing our own stories, we have the opportunity to be our own heroes. And if we're going to be our own heroes here, Zach, what is the way forward that says either this is what I'm looking for as we continue to try to write these stories, or how can we put ourselves in positions where maybe I'm not the hero, but it allows me to at least give myself an opportunity to buy time so that I can keep writing the script and be inspired as I go.
Yeah, so this is, and again, this is back to the way we build, and it's not the only way to do things. And it's not even the right way to do things, although it happens to be this year a good strategy is, man, your bench needs to be running backs, and it needs to be the running backs who have a chance to, it has to be Jerome Ford, it has to be Breida, it has to be the running backs, Chuba Hubbard, who isn't in a position yet where but it has to be that type of player. Gus Edwards. I have Gus Edwards rostered in so many places because he was a throw-in in deals and has been productive every single time he has played. It's building that roster in a way that you can weather this storm. And I hate to go back and harp on the way I treat running backs, because it, again, is not the only way to treat running backs, and it's not even the best way to treat running backs. But I try to attack rookie drafts for my running backs, and I try to spend higher picks on running backs to get the better running backs, and I try to spend more of my later picks on those the Tank Bigsby's and the Sean Tuckers and the players who have a chance to Roschon Johnson to come in and be productive. But if I hit on a Jonathan Taylor, who's another one that's out, I don't even know if we mentioned him, remains out, the NFI IR until week 4. They can't even talk to him until week 4. But a Jonathan Taylor, a Bijan Robinson, as good as Bijan is, Saquon Barkley, a CMC, and you're going to miss on some of these. But trading those running backs after 2, 3 at the outset seasons, get that production, but still have the value of being able to get a first and a young proven wide receiver, you need to be able to do that, and you need to stick to those guns. And again, it's not the I'm right. I don't want to be right about this. I don't. And it's not a bet against injury. Like, that's not what I'm doing. I'm not making that bet because I know, Nick Chubb is going to get hurt, or I know Saquon Barkley is going to get hurt. That's not what that bet is about. The bet is about, even when running backs are not injured, that shelf life. And I know, JMic, you've talked about this before on multiple different podcasts, and I know that you did an entire episode of the Open Bar kind of centered around this, even though the Open Bar was a little bit more freeform and not quite as strategy focused. But the second contract running backs, and how once they get to this second contract, the production ebbs, the chance of them getting a second contract ebbs, and the way the NFL views running backs has changed so much. Even in the last year, the Jonathan Taylor situation is a prime example. The situation with Josh Jacobs, with contract disputes and trying to figure out, like, running backs have gone from this pithy saying by a bunch of nerds, running backs don't matter, to the NFL eventually 4 or 5 or 6 years later kind of internalizing that and realizing, oh, well, when, whoever my starter is that goes down, I can plug in Elijah Mitchell. I can plug in Raheem Mostert. I can plug in Gus Edwards and be fine. I mean, they may not be the exact 1-for-1, but even Carolina trading Christian McCaffrey. Oh, well, we got Chuba Hubbard. He can hack it for a while, and then they can go get Miles Sanders. And if Miles Sanders doesn't hack it, Chuba can come in and fill. It's just a totally different era, a totally different mindset. And I think you're going to see that for the foreseeable future.
Zach, the piece of that is most jarring to me and exciting at the same time. We talk about edges and we talk about these areas of where we know that we want to try to be able to extract, obviously, as much value as possible. And we also want to take the opportunities to ensure that if there's an edge to be had from a process, we want to be exploring those things. As the NFL and as the entire dynasty landscape says that running backs don't matter, I do think for our strategies as we navigate this, that running backs, call me crazy here, how we view the running back position and how we construct our teams with the running back position has never been more important. And that's probably, I don't like that. I said it out loud, didn't sound very good. But I will say that it is highly important how we view the running back position on our dynasty team, Zach. And before I ramble, I feel like there's so much to be explored with that. Go ahead. What was your point here?
But it is it is important, and it's more important the less important people think it is.
Yes,
and that's again where we're trying to find the edges. And I say this all the time: the edges are not in the middle. Like, by definition, the edges are not where the crowd is, not where the majority is. And so we talked about this in the preseason. We talked about this leading up in the non-point scoring season. I've talked about this with Russ and Peter Howard on the grind. This was a very easy to see zero running back year. This was the entire landscape had shifted to wide receivers are more valuable. There are more wide receivers that are scoring. Wide receiver, the position is deep. And so you saw so many people move to the zero running back avenue, which in and of itself, like, it's been right this year, but not, I mean, like, you couldn't have predicted it. But the importance of running back and approaching running back in a way that gives you an advantage is so much more important when nobody's looking at it. because that's the way to sneak a win. I mean, if you went and added Saquon Barkley, or if you, I mean, not Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey. Like Christian McCaffrey right now is the fourth or third highest scoring position player in PPR right now. And he's doing things again tonight because it's what Christian McCaffrey does. He's phenomenal. And they're not necessarily running him right up the middle. They're using Christian McCaffrey in ways to get him in space. They're getting him the ball through the air, which is ultimately hugely valuable to fantasy. And then looking exactly the way we talked, if you look at the players who right now are producing, and you don't have to have them produce all year because they don't cost you what Christian McCaffrey. It's the acquisition cost. It's the ability to get somebody like Kyron Williams late, who is right now running back 2. And yes, I know it's an injury to Eckler, but he also, the first game of the season when Eckler was reasonably healthy, scored a touchdown. Like this is the new era of NFL where we're going more to committees. We're going more to players' skill sets. Brian Robinson right now is running back 3, was not a big name, was not somebody who, and we talked about this before we came on, JMic, but we were trying to kind of pin down the peak, the pinnacle of the non-point scoring season. And I know you'd kind of look through running backs and the landscape, and we decided that it was probably May, because you have all of this buildup to the NFL draft, and then you have this window in May between the NFL draft and whenever your rookie draft is. So it may be a short window. It may push all the way out to June or July, depends on your league. But that's where the value of non-point scoring season crescendos, because now we have all the information we're going to get about the rookies. So your rookie picks are at their highest value from that NFL draft to your rookie draft. And most of the players, if you look at the top 10 or 12 right now in scoring in the NFL, and this is going to shake out differently because we're only in week 3. We've only had 2 weeks of data, but right now, most of these players are not top 24 players from DLF's ADP back in May. We have completely shifted. The points have shifted. We're in a different place.
So for those scoring at home, I'm going to take you down a quick exercise of a look back, memory lane, if you will. Shout out to our good friends over at Dynasty League Football, DLF. When we look at DLF, there is a really stark thing that we see regarding rosters and construction. Not just construction, I should say, but the state of the running back position and how they've brought themselves into the 2023 season. If we look back in May, with DLF ADP, Bijan Robinson was RB1. Jonathan Taylor, who has not played a game in 2023, was RB2. And bear with me a moment. I'm just going to run through names and numbers here for a moment just to kind of paint the picture of this. This script is ugly right now. Christian McCaffrey's RB3 back in May. Awesome, obviously. Breece Hall, when he gets the ball, things are good. Last week, he doesn't get the ball. Not so much coming back from the injury. We don't know what to expect, especially with no Aaron Rodgers there at RB4. Saquon Barkley has missed time already at RB5. I'm going to keep going here, so bear with me. Jahmyr Gibbs, RB6. Kenneth Walker, RB7. Travis Etienne, RB8. Austin Eckler's RB9, and he's already missed time. Josh Jacobs gave you the scare right before the season with the holdout, RB10. Najee Harris, big buns thus far. At this point at RB11, Tony Pollard, who's giving you everything that you could probably hope for so far, even a little bit under expected from what the touches and the analytics say behind what he's done to this point. Ramondre Stevenson, who started last season slow and then came on like gangbusters. We look up again. starting the season slow. Hopefully he comes on like gangbusters, RB13. Nick Chubb, RB14, out for the season. J.K. Dobbins, RB15, out for the season. RB16, Javonte Williams, has not given you what you hoped for with the fact of all of the great news that he's had. And it's been really a mess in Denver right now. Derrick Henry hasn't practiced all week at RB17. It gets uglier. I'm gonna give a few more names. I'm not even gonna get to the real gross parts of this. Rashad White's RB18, DeAndre Swift's RB19. Best of luck with that roller coaster. Dameon Pierce, RB20. If I went 21 through 25, I'm nervous that I would have babies crying, people would be vomiting, pulling off of the road. Like, it would get ugly fast, I would imagine. But the state of the RB situation tells us, or at least as I read through this, tells us that there is opportunity to be had by running backs all over this league. And if the opportunities abound, we need to be understanding that how we structure our teams to be able to account for not just the attrition parts of this, but the rise of committees, the rise of opportunities that are breaking away, the lack of obviously the bell cows that we're seeing, how we're navigating the running back position. And I don't think it's one size fits all, but I do believe that the running back position is something that we must understand is carrying value all across our leagues and being stock tight with them, as opposed to, and this is just a name for reference sake, the hotness that people get excited about, like a Donovan Peoples-Jones, who people are forever excited to hopefully be something or be someone. There are probably literally 45 running backs that you'd rather have than a guy like that or a player of that caliber. So I think it's important to keep in mind how we're structuring, how we're tapping into that value, and understanding that when we're putting our rosters together, the running back position, even as devalued as it is in dynasty circles and fantasy circles, as well as the NFL, opportunities rise. The rise of Kyron Williams, the rise of a Jerome Ford in prime time, Tajay Spears being someone who's getting touches, James Cook becoming that guy in Buffalo. The opportunity abounds. Devon Achane, depth chart, the new Fred Jackson. I tweeted the other day, the new depth chart assassin. Shout out to the FF Ballers. Devon Achane, everyone is perishing in front of him. The lane is clearing quite nicely for him. So I find the running back position and the script that we're currently working with likely being parts of a weird Avengers-like team to help be the heroes of our stories, Zach.
And I go back to, and I always will stand on the shoulders of smart people, because you can see further if you're standing on people who have an idea. And I go back to 2 years ago, you and I sat in the Dynasty portion of the Fantasy Football Expo in Canton, and Scott Connor sat up on a panel, and he talked about running backs and the importance of taking shots at running backs, because you're not just looking for the back who's coming in and taking 16 weeks of carries. You're looking for the backs who come in and produce in single weeks, because anytime you come in and have it, and there's so many players who are going to have a top 12 or a top 24 week at running back this year, and they're reasonably predictable. I mean, we knew last week, even though I didn't get my roster set, we knew last week that it was a DeAndre Swift week. I started him in 3 places and didn't get him in the Scott Fish Bowl, but you could tell because of the injuries, because Gainwell was out, because he was kind of thrust into that position that week where he was the running back one. That wins rostering DeAndre Swift. If he does nothing for the rest of the year, having an RB1 week where you knew he was going to be an RB1 is a win. And you can, for the most part, see the situations where players are going to come in, produce, and if you have them on your roster, you can, in the aggregate, create a running back one over the course of the season without having a single running back that does that for the entire time. And so it's we talk about this a lot. It's the elevator versus the escalator. A wide receiver is more like an escalator. There are people in front of them, so when the wide receiver one goes down, it doesn't necessarily mean that the wide receiver who is out comes in and ascends to the wide receiver one. Those targets get allocated to the talent. I mean, it's been nice to see Puka come in and have the talent to take over that share that of the offense, but that's the exception rather than the rule. The rule is more Sky Moore, not coming in and taking over and usurping that huge portion of targets, but that it gets dispersed to the players who are playing at a higher level. With running back, it's that elevator. We're going up to the floor and we're getting off and we're going, because it's a onesie position where wide receiver, you're starting 2, maybe 3, sometimes 4 if you're Arizona and feeling real frisky. But with running back, this is my running back. Well, now maybe it's, situational or split, but still, in the event of an injury, all of a sudden you've got somebody coming in like Kyron Williams getting that workload, somebody coming in like DeAndre Swift getting that workload. So you have the back, you have the pass catcher, plus you have the production with the chance of uber production. And again, you're not looking for 16 games out of these guys because you're not paying for 16 games out of these players. You don't have to. You can get them later in drafts. Now, with everybody switching to 0 RB, you may have to reach a little, but it's roster construction. It's the shotgun approach. It's firing enough shots off to be able to overcome injuries, to be able to overcome a lack of top end depth, to be able to put that together, make that mosaic of a running back out of what you've got on your bench.
Frankenstein.
That's it.
He's alive. If you putting it together throughout the course of the season and understanding, and I think a lot of folks probably get this at this point, but keeping in mind the importance of, like you said, when each running back or when the player that you're having or that have on your team is likely to be in a position to succeed. So we know that, and I think for a lot of the folks, just for an example, if you take the likes of, or if you have the likes on your team of obviously Derrick Henry, the Nick Chubbs, the Austin Ecklers, they're likely on your team because they're awesome performers, they're bell cows, and if something happens to them, it's a good chance that the season or the team that you had isn't what it's going to be for the duration of the season. When you think about guys like Zach Charbonnet, you think of the Kendre Millers of the world. You think of even Javonte Williams and Breece Hall. These are guys that you're expecting not much necessarily from now, but by the time we get toward the end of the year, they're a part of the rotation of guys that you can either mix into your flex or be running out there as an RB2. And if things really break right, then as an RB1. But then we also have this back half group, or not even back half, just later down the line guys who you want on your teams for contingency plans, for break glass in case of emergency, and or I'm in a position to be able to capitalize on the value that they now provide because of the fact that they've shot up to the top as the elevator that they are, whether that be even for a brief moment, the likes of Jerome Ford, Gus Edwards, or even Kyron Williams as he's ascended, and Cam Akers is now a Minnesota Viking, being in position to take advantage of these things. And I think that, again, it's early, Zach. I don't know that I can necessarily claim this as a W right now, but I think with my thesis, I think I was in a good place with this last rookie draft, in that I was really leaving alone the mid and later round wide receivers. I was pretty much out on all of them, not because they weren't good or not because they weren't talented bunch, because I really thought that this group of running backs would be in position to take advantage of what we're seeing currently with the script that we're watching. The problem then becomes what we talked about last week, is understanding the ramifications of, if I'm way in on all these other running backs, that likely means that I'm either sprinkling or I'm way out, unfortunately, in terms of having them on my roster of the Puka Nakuas, the Tank Dells, and even in some instances, I was still mixing in some Marvin Mims in second rounds. But those types of guys that you'd be excited to otherwise take in a mid to later portion of your rookie drafts, I was out on a lot of those guys, and so I've missed the Puka train. I've missed the Tank boom in value because I'm lying in wait with the Tajay Spears. I'm lying in wait for the opportunity that these folks ascend from a value and role standpoint.
Yeah, and you're going to have a give and take there. Like,
Yes.
you can't have it all. Like, that's
Yes.
where would you put it? That's the thing is you can't have everything in a draft. Well, I guess you can. You had the JMic Invitational. You had the entire first round. You can have everything. But
one shining moment.
but most of the time, when you're in a rookie draft or when you're in a startup draft, you don't have the ammunition, the ability to move around and do everything that you want. And so, to me, you need to make the bets on the best possible chance. And this is a Peter Howard. This is the metrics and what people who navigate through numbers will tell you. It's not about making the right decision. It's about making the decision that is right most often. And it may be a small margin, but if you gain a small margin on a lot of decisions over the course of your dynasty team will be better, and it will be exponentially better because those little wins, those advantages you gain add up. And when that happens, you get better. And so, being able to and the other part of this is the great thing is, even if you don't use these players, so you have 3 weeks of or 2 weeks of Matt Breida, you can all of a sudden you can parlay Matt Breida into a pick that, if your team isn't at a position where Matt Breida helps you out, you're already at a point where you're 2 weeks in and you're like, man, my team is at the bottom of the points for. There's nothing I can do. I'm re-rolling it next year. If you have players that can produce in weeks or multiple weeks that all of the touts are talking about, that you see on Twitter, you see Matthew Berry come on and talk about it, you see Liz Loza come on and talk about it, you see Matt Harmon, whoever it is that the talking heads that you're listening to, if they're talking about these players as with fill-ins for weeks and high potential fill-ins, there's value there. So even if you are not in a position where you can reap those points to your benefit, you can use those points, because now it's point scoring season.
Yep.
And that's where you got to get in the mindset of thinking about value in 3 different phases. You've got points, which have value, and they have value right now. They have value from week 1 until you finish your playoffs. Or if you have a trade deadline, sorry, Russ, I didn't say that out loud, but if you have a trade deadline, they have value until your trade deadline. You also have the rookie pick value, which is the dreaming value. This is, we want to just absolutely have this rosy picture of what all of these rookies are going to be. And even before the picks are assigned to players, that we're dreaming on those picks. And then once the players have been drafted, and this is why Dynasty gets so youth-centric and why we poo-poo the older veterans, we start dreaming on careers. And so then you have the value of this extended career value. And so there are the 3 phases to me of value. And if you don't think of it that way and don't attack them in the periods of time when they are vulnerable. So right now it's a great time to trade points because points are valuable. It's a great time to trade for rookie picks because rookie picks right now don't have as much value. We're not there yet. We're not thinking about this class yet. This class hasn't fully formed. This class is still, swirling around. We're looking in the pensieve. I'm back to the writer's strike here. We're in the pensieve in Dumbledore's office, and we're looking, and things are still swirling around. They haven't solidified yet. We don't have a grasp on what this class is. So you can attack adding picks by trading points right now. And so it's a win-win because your points are as high as they're going to get because you're in point scoring season. The picks haven't firmed up, and so their value is lower, especially at the beginning of this season. We're still thinking about Puka Nacua and Bijan Robinson and all the players we got here. And so that I think that's where we're at, where there are advantages to be gained by being prepared, doing the thing where you stack running backs in a roster construction wise on your bench, but also understand that it's not just one facet to that. There's not just one way you can gain an advantage by having these backs. You can gain an advantage by the points, but you can also trade the points for an advantage.
Those 3 points of value, I feel like, are one of the more pillars in my mind from my school of Zac Reed, the school of Zac Reed thugonomics, if you will. That is wildly crucial, and even when we think about the value of that and how those things ebb and flow and change depending upon where we are on the actual calendar. I think back to Zach. I know we were discussing best ball prior to recording this evening, and best ball is something that over the last couple of years I very much enjoy. I think it's a lot of fun, and it allows me to be able to scratch the itch of drafting without the actual in-season management that goes along with it. The kicker, though, and major shout out to, I know someone that we've referenced before on this show, Peter Overzet, the guys over at Ship Chasing, big Pat Carrane fan. Ben Gretsch is also there too. That group, that triumvirate, I'm a huge fan of. I very much enjoy. They're very thoughtful with what the majority, I think, of what they say, specifically their analysis, because sometimes the conversations could just go way left. Very, very interesting topics that happen at times. However, they're super thoughtful and they're purposeful in how they navigate the construction of their rosters. And one of the things that really stands out to me about how they're constructive, or excuse me, how they're purposeful in doing so, and how they do it just very direct, very driven. One of the things that they address or talk through is that when we were earlier on in the best ball season, which is just, real sicko mode stuff, just after the Super Bowl, prior to the actual draft, the real sickos who are on underdog at that time of the year, they talk about how the RB2 in offenses are not something that we have a very clear picture of, and that actually happens like the majority of the summer. We think we have a pretty good idea as to who the number 2 is in certain instances, but we really, in a lot of those instances, have no idea until we get to the August and even sometimes the September timeframe. When we think about last year, we thought, okay, Joe Mixon is inefficient again, even though if he gets all that work, we know that Chris Evans is going to be a thing, or Trevion Williams is going to be a thing, and neither of them were. And then they draft Chase Brown in the offseason, and we think, oh, Chase Brown's definitely the number 2 in Cincinnati. And so obviously that's not been the case, and really you haven't wanted anything in Cincinnati right now. But those waters are really murky when we look at who the backup running backs are. And so I think that as we continue to have those times of clarity, the closer that we get to the season, maybe one of the takeaways that I'm thinking through, and I don't know if this is concrete, but one of the takeaways being the closer that we get to the August timeframe, to the September when the season is kicking off, maybe that's a great time when we talk about optimal times to be trading for picks, optimal time to trade for players. Maybe that's really the time to start attacking that market, because again, it's the backup. No one's really putting a ton of stock into the value of a Kyron Williams, the value of a Matt Breida, even though when we know these guys are the number twos in their offenses, no one's really checking for them. So maybe it is a case where we take our third round picks and we talk about being early to the market. Maybe we're extra early to the market if there's a situation or a guy that we really are excited about, or in contrast, maybe not excited about. Maybe we're attacking that time frame to really be declaring that moment, declaring that time that I'm leveraging these resources to get in on these players now, in hopes that this third that I throw out for a Matt Breida, or maybe Matt Breida is not the best of options. This third that I throw out for Jerome Ford, hey, it's turned into a second, like after 1 week, and trying to navigate that way. What are your thoughts there as I ramble and stumble through that?
No, I think that's exactly right. I think that is a really good time to go attack trades in general. And when you do attack trades headed into the season, because that's, once when running back rooms start solidifying, when we start understanding that, that's also the point in time where people start thinking about their lineup, and they start looking at, I need this and I need that and I need that. And so you can make bigger trades. You can go acquire players or move players that you want to move with pieces thrown in. And I think that yes, go attack them with picks, but also look to get players like Gus Edwards thrown back in the back, because that's not going to matter. Kyron Williams would not have made a sniff of a difference in a trade back in August or July.
Nope.
Adding a player. But again, he was a player that we liked up until the combine. As a community, we liked, not just us, but up until the combine, everybody was in on Kyron Williams. And I didn't cool on Kyron Williams until he dropped in the draft, but still, if you could get him in the third round, he had that pass catcher profile. He had the ability to carry. He's a little undersized, but that's fine. We saw this with his profile, and so much of that, I think, and this may take me just a little bit to the left into kind of content consumption too, because I think we struggle with this. We've shifted so fast, and it makes me feel old. I am Gen X, so I saw the McDonaldization of everything. I saw, and in fantasy football, maybe I shouldn't admit this, but I was, you go buy the magazine and you read, okay, well, this is what LaDainian Tomlinson is projected for this year. And so you had full, multi-page articles on players, and then all of a sudden you had the McDonaldization. We want everything fast. We want everything packaged. We want everything easily digestible. You start with the internet. You had blogs and that sort of thing, and ESPN.com. And then all of a sudden it got smaller and faster, and you had Twitter, and it started off, you had 140 characters, and that was pretty tight. And then they expanded a little. So you have the 280, but then all of a sudden you had TikTok, and now you're getting everything for content in 30 seconds, and a little dance, maybe not from me. You don't want to see that.
Come on.
Yeah. And now too, you've got the algorithm driving views and clicks driving the algorithm. And so you have people firing off hot takes. You have people, sometimes you'll see people throw out an opinion that is obviously wrong, like blatantly wrong. We saw the one at the beginning of the offseason that was, and I can't even remember who the receiver was, that was better than Justin Jefferson. But do you remember that? Like
Yes.
it was, I don't even remember who it was. It might have been Kadarius Toney is better than Justin Jefferson. It was somebody of that ilk. I was like, but to do that drives people engaging. It drives them to correct you. It drives them to argue with you. And when you do that, the algorithm says, oh, this needs to be seen because it's driving interactions. If it drives interactions, it drives ad revenue. So you have to kind of be discerning a little bit with the content that you're getting, because content is not now driven by what's necessarily good. And there are good content creators
Right.
who do things succinctly. And I mean, Overzet is a prime example of what he does with the randomizer and that, like, it's fun and entertaining and quick, but still gives you meat behind an analysis behind it. But you gotta understand, you have to be able to parse the difference between hot takes, that tactical engagement driving, and people who are going against consensus based on something that they see that they can back up. Because there is that, and I'm this is what I do. Is if you don't stop me, I'll just go on forever.
Keep going.
Like Peter Howard and I were talking last night, and he just had to re-rank things for DLF, and he ranked Sky Moore at 250 overall. And somebody dropped in his DM, was like, what are you doing? You can't rank Sky Moore at 250 overall. He's like, there are 40 or 50 players who are not as good as Sky Moore that you have ranked ahead of him. And he's like, yeah, I can. Because of that. Like, he's like, it doesn't matter to me if Sky Moore is ranked below consensus, I'm never going to draft him. And so all of these players I'm ranking ahead of him are players that I would rather take shots on. And it's not necessarily Sky Moore is terrible, but it's the bet of Sky Moore is not as good as the potential upside of these players that he ranked ahead of him. So it's not even a talent play. It's a bet on what potentially is the gain versus what is the acquisition cost. And to me, that's going against consensus.
Yes.
Even though it appears to be a hot take, it's not. And so to be able to parse that, to be able to have that level of discerning eye, but also I think you have to have conversations with the content creators that you're consuming. Because if you don't, how do you know where they arrived at the place that they arrived?
The other day, I've been tweeting a lot lately, Zach, and by a lot, I mean like once a week, maybe over the last
more than I have been
tweeting a lot. You know what about once a week? The other day, I was just lamenting the difference, or basically when people use the words "the best," when really, when they say that, they mean I prefer or my favorite, right? So we toss, and as I've told you before, Zach, like I really wish that we, as a society, as people, would go about choosing our words as carefully as we choose the clothes that we wear, as carefully as we choose how we engage in the workplace. I just wish we were much more thoughtful about the words that we use, and even as something as simple as you saying or someone saying the best. Hey, the best running back in the league. All right, hold up. Like there's a lot of gray that can be in that. There's a lot of your criteria of best and my criteria of best.
Yeah.
Someone can't do something, and again, we've been round and around about like guys like Nick Chubb or Derrick Henry in terms of being pass catchers. It's not that they can't do it, but people say they can't pass catch. Well, they haven't shown it at the NFL level. So does it mean they can't do it? It's like, I don't want to get stuck in the minutia, but I do think that it's important, even in an example like you just told with Peter, being clear or people understanding This is Peter's ranking. This is Peter saying I'm not putting Sky Moore up here because I can't. I do not want anyone to look at the ranking and say I put Sky Moore in my lineup because Peter Howard rated them or had them at whatever ranking. And look, Peter, I get it. I get it, PA Howdy. I feel you on that, man.
Well, and I mean, I'm sure you go through the same thing, and I know I have with rookie rankings, where I'll rank a player, and all of a sudden somebody will come in and be like, "You how do you not have, you know, whatever player in your top 10 or top 12 or you know what it was Kadarius Toney in 2021." Was outside of my top 10. So when I dropped my top 10 list, people were like, "Where is Kadarius Toney?"
Not here.
Not there. Well, how come he's so athletic? And I said, that's fine, but you got to scheme him touches. And we've seen so often that fail where like even and everyone points to Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill did not succeed when they schemed him touches. Like he was fine, but he succeeded because he transitioned into a wide receiver.
Yes.
That you could scheme touches for, but you didn't have to. He can go down the field, run routes, get open, and get open with a vengeance.
Yes.
And to be able to have that skill set and morph into a better well-rounded player and still have that skill set of you know the dynamism and the be able to play in space and be able to catch the ball behind the line of scrimmage and make plays, having that as a tool in your box as opposed to being the entire box,
yes,
it makes a difference. So again, it's just a matter of figuring out what the people that you are listening to are looking at to come to the conclusions that they are, because I don't think anyone goes out there, or very few people go out there with the intention to deceive you or do a disservice to your fantasy team. But I also think that it's a real tough market right now. There are a lot of people, it's very saturated. There are a lot of content creators, and it's an easy way to get clicks is to fire off a hot take. And so you have to understand what's behind that when you're consuming content. Otherwise, you're going to end up, you know, chasing that same, it's, you know, the Wile E. Coyote. You're going to buy the Acme rocket and you're going to be right into the same rock trying to catch the Roadrunner, and you're not going to get there.
The letter of the day is D for discernment. Be discerning about what you take in, Zach. I absolutely love the time that we get to have together, and I think tonight's discussion really just pushes me to a place of understanding that planning is obviously a good thing, and we talk a lot about the mechanics behind that, but understanding that not just the planning, but the being purposeful about what we do, being purposeful about how we attack positions, and purposeful how we, when everyone else is looking at something as not valuable, how do we do our best Ariel impression from The Little Mermaid and treasure the things that most people are going to be throwing out. So if everyone's going to be throwing out the running back position, what does it look like when out of a roster of 28 active players that we have 18 of them as running backs? Like how can we really lean in? And I think that there's so much to be mined from being purposeful and stop plenty in that space.
Yeah, and the other part of that for me, and I always hate to admit that I'm a Patriots fan. I grew up here, so I get a little bit of a pass, and I try not to be obnoxious. But watching Bill Belichick, I couldn't even count the number of games where the Patriots went into halftime behind, where they came out in the first half and the other team had done something that they didn't expect. They went into halftime, they countered it, and when they came back out, the other team stayed stagnant, and the Patriots had an answer for what they were doing, and ended up outpacing them and winning the game, at the end, going away. And I think that's kind of a lesson for this is, yeah, we're here. This has sucked. The first 2 weeks, your team may be in shambles, but there is a chance to pivot, to reassess, to reevaluate, to figure out the counter and to move forward. And the counter may not be, I'm going to win my league this year. The counter may be, okay, I'm going to embrace the Caleb Williams chase. And that's fine, but you have to figure out what the best way forward is and the best counter. And so, like, I guess we're back to the figuring out how to write that story that's going to be the best way to get your team the way you want it to be. You got to pick a direction, and we've talked about this. We'll probably, maybe next week we'll do a run back of that episode that you and I did with the edge finders and getting out early and figuring out who you need to add or who you need to jettison, because we're at a point where after week 4, you should be making decisions.
Time is coming. Time is coming, Zach. Declaration season is almost here. And as far as a time, I think our time has come for us to be able to close up shop on tonight's episode of the Dynasty Dummies. Thank you for joining us, people. Again, y'all could spend 50 some odd minutes doing anything in the world. But for whatever you're doing, however long you're spending with us in your earballs, we appreciate it. Whether that's at 1.5x speed or whatever it is, we're just grateful that you'd spend time with us. So, hey, let's continue to write our own stories. Even though the Writers Association is on strike, we have the opportunity to be our own heroes. And if we don't want to be our own heroes, we can put some folks in position to be able to help us accomplish the goals that we've set for ourselves and help us define success for our fantasy teams, whether that's, again, winning that Caleb Williams chase, or whether that is actually winning championships. Zach, it's on you to close, my man.
Yeah, we appreciate you rolling with us. We appreciate everybody who joins us, whether you're here in person, whether you're catching us on YouTube, whether you're here in podcast form. This is always a fun journey. JMic, it's always great to talk to you. And we appreciate everybody, all the interaction. This has been the Dynasty Dummies. Thank you for listening. Peace.
Find the button.
It's here. I see it. I found it. We're there.